What happens when the creators of Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and Dragon Ball walk into a room and say, "Let's make something no one's ever done before"? You get a game that didn't just break the mold, it rewrote it. Chrono Trigger is the result of a once-in-a-lifetime collaboration, packed with passion, struggle, and genius. And behind the scenes, the story of how it came to life is just as epic as the game itself. Stick around, because once you hear what went on during its development, you'll never look at this game the same way again. Back in 1992, something incredible started brewing, and no one even realized it yet. Three giants from the Japanese gaming world were on a trip to the United States: Hironobu Sakaguchi, Yuji Horii, and Akira Toriyama. Each one already had a legendary title under their belt: Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and Dragon Ball. But this trip wasn't just for sightseeing. Somewhere between conversations, meals, and jet lag, an idea started forming, and a bold one. What if they joined forces to create a new kind of RPG? Not another entry in their usual franchises, but something totally fresh. A project that could push the limits of what games could be, both mechanically and emotionally. That's where Kazuhiko Aoki comes in. He wasn't just a name in the credits. He was a producer at Squaresoft who knew how to turn crazy ideas into actual games. He had worked with Sakaguchi before and understood what this new concept needed: someone to take the lead and keep the vision on track. With Aoki in charge, the whole thing started moving from "what if" to "let's make it happen." They locked themselves in a room and spent 4 straight days hammering out the core of what would become Chrono Trigger. 4 days, no fluff, no filler, just raw creativity, and the foundation was set. Now, they needed the people to build it, and Squaresoft didn't hold back. They gathered an all-star squad of developers, around 50 to 60 of them, which was huge for the time. This wasn't just another project. This was a dream lineup made of the best artists, programmers, writers, and designers in the industry. People would later call them the Dream Team, and it wasn't just for show. One of the most important additions was Masato Kato, a writer who had just wrapped up work on Ninja Gaiden. He would later go on to shape the stories of games like Xenogears, Chrono Cross, and even parts of Final Fantasy VII. At this point, he was handed an early story draft by Horii and told, "Make it work." And just like that, development kicked off in 1993. And believe it or not, the whole time travel concept didn't come from the big names like Hironobu Sakaguchi or Yuji Horii. It came from someone behind the scenes, a lesser-known dev whose idea almost slipped through the cracks. At first, even Masato Kato wasn't convinced. He thought jumping between eras might make everything feel messy and disconnected. But the more the team played with the concept, the more it started to click. They realized that time travel didn't need to be a gimmick. It could be the heart of everything. Once that clicked, Kato and Horii got to work. And they didn't just slap together a story with different timelines. They built something rich and layered, connecting the past, present, and future in a way that actually made sense. Funny thing is, Chrono Trigger wasn't even supposed to be a standalone title at first. Squaresoft thought about making it part of the Seiken Densetsu series, what we know as the Mana series. It even had a working title, Maru Island, which had nothing to do with the final version. It was even planned for release on the Super Famicom disk drive. But that all changed when the partnership between Sony and Nintendo fell apart and the SNES CD project got scrapped. That one move sent shockwaves through Square's entire lineup. Games being developed for discs suddenly had to be reworked for cartridges with way less memory to work with. Hiromichi Tanaka, known for his work on Mana series, recalled how brutal that shift was. All their early plans were tossed out. But in that chaos, a new direction started to take shape. To make this new vision work, Square brought in some serious talent. Yoshinori Kitase, who had just co-directed Final Fantasy VI, Akihiko Matsui, the guy behind the battle systems in Final Fantasy IV and V, and Takashi Tokita, who would later direct Parasite Eve. Now, even though names like Sakaguchi and Horii get most of the spotlight, there were others shaping the vision too. Yoshinori Kitase had a big influence on the direction of the game. He later went on to direct some of the most iconic Final Fantasy titles. Then you've got Tetsuya Takahashi, working with Akira Toriyama to shape the game's look and feel. That same Takahashi would later create the entire Xeno franchise, Xenogears, Xenosaga, and Xenoblade Chronicles. The talent here wasn't just strong, it was stacked. And it didn't stop there. This project was also the starting point for Tetsuya Nomura, who would go on to lead modern Final Fantasy and become the creative force behind Kingdom Hearts. When you look back, it's insane how many future legends were involved in this one game. Once the vision was locked in, things moved fast. Akira Toriyama stepped in to handle the entire visual identity. We're talking characters, creatures, environments, vehicles, the whole deal. And while most people knew him from Dragon Quest or Dragon Ball, Chrono Trigger let him stretch his creative muscles in new ways. His style wasn't just present, it was everywhere, from the tiniest enemy sprite to the largest story moments. What made the visuals stand out was how close the in-game art matched Toriyama's original sketches. It wasn't a loose interpretation. The devs worked hard to make those designs feel alive in pixel form. Back then, RPGs didn't usually aim for that level of artistic fidelity. But here, you could instantly recognize his signature style, big expressions, bold silhouettes, and characters that just popped off the screen. While Toriyama was shaping the look, Hironobu Sakaguchi focused on the mechanics. He built the foundation for the combat system and came up with monster ideas that kept fights fast and fresh. And while that was happening, Yuji Horii and Masato Kato were deep into building a story that jumped across timelines and genres. Chrono Trigger didn't follow the usual fantasy route. Sure, it had swords and magic, but it also threw in robots, dystopias, space-age tech, and ancient ruins. It took inspiration from science fiction classics like The Terminator and Alien, and somehow blended it all into a single coherent world. It wasn't afraid to be weird, ambitious, or emotional, and you can't overlook the timing of it all. While this game was being made, Toriyama was also working on the android saga in Dragon Ball Z. That same energy, time travel, futuristic tech, bioengineered beings bled into Chrono Trigger. The themes echoed across both works, and fans definitely noticed. Even the humor had Toriyama's fingerprints all over it. According to Sakaguchi, that lighthearted tone, the funny expressions, the playful banter, all of that came straight from Toriyama's storytelling style. That's one of the things that makes Chrono Trigger feel so timeless. One moment you're caught in a heartbreaking scene that hits way harder than you'd expect from a pixelated RPG, and the next, you're thrown into a bizarre situation that makes you laugh out loud. It walks a fine line between emotional weight and genuine charm, without ever feeling forced. When Chrono Trigger dropped in 1995, it wasn't just another RPG hitting store shelves. This was a straight-up dream project. You had the mastermind behind Final Fantasy, the creator of Dragon Quest, and the artist behind Dragon Ball, all teaming up on one game. That kind of lineup was insane even by today's standards, and back then it was absolutely unheard of. Squaresoft knew they had lightning in a bottle and went all in on the promotion. Magazines were flooded with ads, especially those linked to Shueisha and Shonen Jump, where Dragon Ball was king. Gaming expos showed behind-the-scenes looks teasing the legendary team involved. TV commercials were everywhere, which was a big deal, because RPGs usually didn't get that kind of spotlight. And when the game finally launched on March 11th, 1995, it didn't just live up to the hype, it exploded past it. Players and critics couldn't believe what they were seeing. The graphics pushed the Super Nintendo to its limits. The gameplay felt ahead of its time, and the story hit on a whole other level. In Japan alone, it sold over 2 million copies, which was insane for the time. Outside Japan, it moved another 250,000 units. Not huge by today's numbers, but for a genre that was still growing in the West, it was a big win. If you're enjoying the video so far, go ahead and hit that like button, it helps a ton. And if you're into deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for being here, seriously, it means a lot. Now, let's get back to it. One of the smartest things Chrono Trigger did was ditch random battles completely. Back in the day, most RPGs would stop you dead every few steps with a fight you didn't ask for. It broke the flow, and honestly, it got old fast, but Chrono Trigger changed that. Enemies are visible on the screen, and battles happen right where you stand. No separate battle screen, no interruptions, just smooth transitions that keep you locked into the world. This system made exploring feel way more natural. You could move through dungeons, check every corner for loot, or just push forward with the story without being dragged into constant fights. And if you wanted to grind or test new abilities, you had full control over when to jump into combat. Other games like Secret of Mana had a similar setup, but that one leaned more into action. Chrono Trigger stuck to turn-based combat, but still kept things seamless. What's wild is that this clean design came out of a hardware limitation. The game was originally meant for a CD-based system, but when that fell through, they had to fit everything onto a cartridge. Turns out, the ROM was fast enough to handle everything on one screen without needing separate loading times. So, that technical shift ended up being a win for gameplay. Even though there are still a few scripted fights you can't avoid, especially later in the game, it never feels overwhelming. Sure, some players think those forced battles are more annoying than random encounters, but overall, the system gives you way more control. It respects your time and lets you play at your own pace. That alone puts it miles ahead of a lot of RPGs from the same era. Chrono Trigger's battle system keeps things simple in the best way possible. It doesn't throw a million mechanics at you. Instead, it gives you just enough depth to stay interesting without becoming overwhelming. That's why it works so well as an entry point for anyone new to JRPGs. You get to learn the basics of turn-based combat, party synergy, and elemental strengths without having to study a guide just to make it through the first few hours. But what's funny is that during playtesting, a lot of people thought it was too hard. Developers like Hironobu Sakaguchi and Yuji Horii later admitted they had to go back and rebalance things after getting feedback from testers who felt the game was being too punishing. One of the solutions they came up with was the Old Man at the end of time, a character designed specifically to drop helpful hints if you ever felt lost or stuck. It's a small thing, but it shows how focused they were on making the experience accessible without dumbing it down. Each character has their own elemental type and role in battle. You've got light, fire, ice, shadow, each one locked into a specific party member. This means team building is less about turning everyone into everything and more about working with what each character does best. You've got some who hit hard with physical attacks, others who specialize in magic. So choosing the right team for the area you're exploring becomes part of the strategy. Progression follows the traditional path. You level up by earning experience, but you also gain tech points to unlock new abilities. What sets Chrono Trigger apart is the way it handles combo attacks. 2 or even 3 characters can link their abilities together to unleash powerful dual and triple techs. The animations for these moves are super clean and satisfying, and unlocking new combinations always feels rewarding. But what really makes Chrono Trigger unforgettable is the way it tells its story. It doesn't just take you on a journey through different locations, it throws you across time itself. You go from prehistoric jungles to apocalyptic futures, and every era feels alive, with its own history, culture, and visual identity. Watching the world evolve across thousands of years makes everything feel so much bigger and more meaningful. The writing is tight. There's no wasted dialogue, no bloated exposition. Every moment feels like it matters. And even though some critics say the story plays it safe or doesn't take enough risks, what it does really well. It's clear, it's emotional, and it keeps pushing forward without dragging you through filler. Character development isn't always front and center, but when it hits hard. Some of the most emotional moments are hidden in optional side quests late in the game. These scenes give depth to the cast and let you see different sides of them that aren't always visible during the main story. It's subtle, but effective. And for players who want to dig deeper, those moments are there, waiting to be found. Another thing people point out is the game's length. You can finish it in about 20 to 25 hours. But instead of seeing that as a flaw, it actually feels like a strength. In a time where most RPGs throw in hours of padding just to stretch out the runtime, Chrono Trigger stays focused. No pointless fetch quests, no grinding for hours, no minigames that waste your time, and every side mission connects to the story or characters in a way that feels important. It's a game that respects your time while still offering a complete experience. The pacing is tight, the flow is smooth, and it constantly gives you something new to see or do. Now, if you jump into the DS version, things are a bit different. That version adds some extra content like the Lost Sanctum and Dimensional Vortex. Some players enjoy the challenge, but let's be real. They can get repetitive and break the pacing a bit. They're optional, sure, but they don't really match the flow of the original game. What does hold up across every version is the new Game Plus feature. Back when this released, that concept was brand new. The idea that you could start the game over with your stats and gear and unlock different endings depending on when you decide to face the final boss, that was a game changer. It gave Chrono Trigger a huge amount of replay value without bloating the initial playthrough. There are 13 different endings, each tied to specific choices or timing. Some are lighthearted, some are intense. And while not every one of them drastically changes the story, they're all fun to discover. The fact that Chrono doesn't speak is something that still sparks debate. Some players feel disconnected from him because of it. Others say it helps them feel more immersed. But the truth is, the decision wasn't random. It was something the dev team spent a lot of time thinking about. Yuji Horii, the creator of Dragon Quest, has always been a huge supporter of silent protagonists. His reasoning is simple. If the main character talks, it can break the illusion that the player and the character are the same person. For Horii, it's about keeping that connection intact. He believes that once your character starts speaking on their own, they stop being your character and become someone else. And while not everyone agrees with that philosophy, it definitely fits the kind of story Chrono Trigger is trying to tell. The game is built around player choice and perspective. You're the one moving through time, making the calls and leading the party. Chrono doesn't need to speak because everything he does is guided by your decisions. It keeps things clean, lets the story unfold around you without forcing you to watch cutscenes where your character suddenly has a personality you didn't sign up for. Of course, this doesn't work for every type of game. In something like The Witcher or Final Fantasy, the characters are fully written and their voices are part of what drives the story. You're there to experience their journey, not create your own. But in Chrono Trigger, the silent protagonist just makes sense. It might not be for everyone, but in the context of this game, it fits perfectly. One thing that didn't land quite right in the original Super Nintendo version of Chrono Trigger was the English script. The translation was handled by Ted Woolsey, who worked on several Square games back then. And while he was known for localizing quickly under pressure, some of his choices felt off, especially when it came to Frog. In the Japanese version, Frog speaks in a noble, old-fashioned tone that reflects his character. But Woolsey went full Shakespeare with it, throwing in outdated English that wasn't even used correctly half the time. Stuff like will thee, instead of will thou, ended up sounding more awkward than authentic. And what made it more jarring was that Frog was the only character talking like that. No one else from his era had that style of speech, which killed the consistency. Thankfully, the DS version cleaned that up. Frog still speaks in a more refined tone, but it's way more natural, and the people around him actually match that style. It feels like they all belong to the same world now. It's a subtle change, but it makes a big difference in how immersive the dialogue feels. That's one of the reasons why the DS version is often the go-to recommendation today. Before Chrono Trigger ever had a single line of code, Yasunori Mitsuda was buried in frustration. He was working as a sound programmer at Square, helping with the technical side of games like Final Fantasy V and Secret of Mana. But deep down, what he really wanted was to compose. That was his dream. Problem was, Square wasn't giving him the chance. His salary was low, his creative spark was wasting away, and he knew he couldn't keep going like that. So one day, he made a bold move. He marched into Hironobu Sakaguchi's office and said he was done, unless they let him compose. Instead of shutting the door, Sakaguchi handed him the keys to something huge, Chrono Trigger. It was a risky bet, but Mitsuda didn't hold back. He dove headfirst into the project, working day and night, sometimes sleeping in the office. He was pouring everything he had into every track, like his entire future depended on it. The main theme, he wrote that in one sitting. All the pressure, all the bottled-up ambition, just exploded into something unforgettable. That opening track doesn't just sound great, it feels like someone finally getting the chance to do what they were born to do. However, the process of creating Chrono Trigger's soundtrack wasn't all passion and triumph. As the deadline got closer, everything started to pile up on Yasunori Mitsuda. At first, he was ahead of schedule, feeling confident and creatively charged. But as development ramped up, the rest of the team flew past him. Suddenly, he was behind, overwhelmed, and out of time. In the final stretch, he went 4 days without sleep, locked in his office trying to finish music for one of the game's last big boss fights. He later admitted he felt like running away. And just when things couldn't get worse, disaster hit. His hard drive crashed. 40 tracks, gone. All that work, all that time, erased in seconds. But even then, he didn't quit. He pushed through the burnout and kept writing, refusing to let the game suffer. He didn't want to make quick loops or filler music just to check a box. Every piece he composed was crafted to last, to loop smoothly, and to reflect the emotions of the moment. He treated every track like it mattered, because it did. But all that pressure eventually caught up to him. He became seriously ill from stress and had to step away before finishing the entire score. That's when Nobuo Uematsu, the legendary composer behind Final Fantasy, stepped in to help. He completed 10 tracks, with one more handled by Noriko Matsueda. Thanks to their support, Mitsuda's vision was preserved. When the full team finally sat down and saw the finished game, Mitsuda broke down. He cried openly, and so did many of the other developers. After everything they'd been through, the late nights, the stress, the setbacks, they had created something beautiful. And that emotion, that raw effort and heart, is why the music in Chrono Trigger still moves people to this day. Back in the 90s, game studios had something that feels almost impossible today: total creative freedom. No shareholders breathing down their necks, no endless meetings about monetization strategies, just a group of passionate people trying to make something unforgettable. That's exactly what happened with Chrono Trigger. It wasn't built to sell merchandise or chase trends. It was built because a few of the most brilliant minds in gaming had a crazy idea, and they actually had the space to bring it to life. And somehow, despite all the risks and the ambition, everything clicked. The result wasn't just another RPG, it was a masterpiece that pushed the Super Nintendo way beyond what anyone thought was possible at the time. Today, making a game like this would be a nightmare. 8-year development cycle, corporate meddling, half-baked launches followed by day one patches, and all the creativity buried under piles of analytics and investor reports. But Chrono Trigger came from a different world, a world where the game itself came first. That's why it still holds up. Not because of nostalgia, but because it was made with purpose. Every detail, from the art to the music to the story and mechanics, was crafted with care. There were no shortcuts, no filler, just raw, inspired creativity from people who genuinely loved what they were doing. And that's something you can't fake or replicate. You can't schedule it or throw more money at it. What happened during the making of Chrono Trigger was lightning in a bottle. A rare moment when everything lined up perfectly. And decades later, it still feels just as magical. So, now it's your turn. What does Chrono Trigger mean to you? Is it your favorite RPG of all time, or does another classic take that spot? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you want to go even further, becoming a member helps a ton and keeps this kind of content alive. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here.